Started too. Erick, by the way,
All right.
I love your camera framing, Erick. That's always iconic. It's like the top half of your head.
Yeah. All right. Welcome everyone to CougarCS Money Talk with Madeleine. So I'm going to rephrase our statement. Our mission is to transition students into young professionals, foster a community around diversity and inclusion, and provide mentorship and academic support for all students. I'm going to transition to our announcements. So our upcoming events, we have the BYO keyboard on November 11th. This is where you get to go and build your own keyboard. So it'll be a fun event. It's a first come, first serves only for CougarCS members. So the first 50 people that show up, you can also be your own keyboard. So it sounds like fun. So come out and enjoy a good time. Also, officer election application closes on November 12th, so make sure you get those in. It's really good to put those on your resume, build character, and also your social develop skills. So why not try it out? So fill those out. It's due on November 12th. And then we have the officer election on November 18th. We also have the Linux Workshop 101 on November 23rd, where you get to learn about Linux and all its applications and so forth. And finally, on banquet, we have on November 30th. So if you want to hang out, party, and have some great food, free food, come out and join, socialize, and have a great time as well. And I'm going to pass it over to Madeleine to discuss the event.
Alrighty. Well, my name is Madeleine Wilson. I am a UH alum. I graduated in December of 2019 from the computer science program. I've been with IBM for almost 2 years now. And I figured I could teach you a little bit about the things that I wish I'd known when I graduated. So some stuff about money and financials, your health insurance options if you get like a full-time offer kind of thing. I do have to preface by saying I'm not a financial advisor and I am not going to give you specific advice on what, stocks and funds to invest in. This is more of a discussion about like, I want to teach y'all like the vocabulary surrounding it, what it actually means when people talk about stuff being invested and whatnot. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, so I figured this would be a little bit more of a talk, but I do have a fun little spreadsheet that I made that can show you. I give it to CougarCS so they can distribute it later. If you guys wanted to actually play around with putting in, how much money an offer is, what that might actually look like as far as taxes goes, things like that. And I also set up 2 sample budgets, one for like straight out of college, you're making 75K per year. And it shows how you can effectively have the down payment for a house by the time you're 32, or you could be a millionaire by the time you're 41. And I also have another one that I made that is if you had student loans. I did a little bit of research on that, found that the average student loan amount from a student at UH is around 26,000. So my estimates are based on a $30,000 student loan. So I set up a simple budget that shows how you can pay it off in less than 3 years. But I figured we can start with talking about what 401ks are, IRAs, and HSA, and what Roth versus traditional is. So a IRA, an individual retirement account, is a kind of account anyone can open. You are going to be the only person putting money into that. They do have limits. So an IRA, you can only contribute $6,000 per year in it. The reason the government limits that kind of stuff is because it actually has pretty good returns. And I don't know if this is the real motivation, but it feels like the government doesn't want you to be able to make as much as you should. So you can only put in $6,000 a year. That does go up. I think by 2022, it'll be $6,500. So they do increase the amounts to keep up with inflation.
Can you contribute it before taxes or?
So we'll get to that. the thing about an IRA is because it's in a retirement account, you can't take the money out until you are retirement age without getting a penalty. I think it's a 10% penalty. It's huge. So if you get like stuck in whatever, you've been making money, you get some sort of family tragedy, car accident, you get sick, whatever, and you need money immediately and you take it out of your IRA, you're going to pay a 10% penalty on that. The point of an IRA, and similar with a 401k, is that you should be incentivized to leave it alone. That is your, when you're old and not making money, this is how you live. That's what the government wants you to treat it as. Ultimately, so you're not like elderly and living on the streets. This is your own safety net. If you want to make investments and have like liquid cash to work with, you know, you want to buy a house, you want to do renovations, you want to get a new car, you should not be putting that money into an IRA or 401k. You should have a brokerage. And that's totally separate. The question about taxes, so that is what a Roth, so retirement age is, I think you can start taking it out at 59 and a half. But by the time you're 65, you can't continue contributing to it. So it's, I think 59 and a half is when you can start taking money out, but you can't withdraw all of it. You can do it like incrementally. By the time you're 65 is when you could pull all of it out if you wanted. And those ages are subject to change, unfortunately. They have been getting higher as the US exists for longer. It's sort of in line with life expectancy. I guess they want you to have 10 to 20 years to not work and live off of your own money. But the taxes, that's what a Roth versus a traditional is. And this goes for 401ks as well. So a traditional IRA, a traditional 401k will take money straight from your paycheck and get deposited into this account. You're not paying taxes on it. You will pay taxes when you withdraw the money. If you're doing a Roth 401k or IRA, the money basically gets taxed. It's kind of like it went to your bank account and then went into these other accounts. Basically, why you would choose one over the other is choosing a Roth IRA is like betting that taxes will be higher when you're older than they are right now. That could change, but realistically, taxes in the grand scheme of things, taxes are not that high right now. There was a point, I think, in the 60s and 70s where income tax in the US in some places got to like 90%. In Texas, you don't pay any income tax. You pay, or at least state income tax. You pay federal. I live in New York City, so I pay city income tax and state income tax, and it sucks. So in Texas, if you're making around 75,000, about 20 to 22% of that is going to get paid in taxes. Where I live, about 36% of my paycheck is paid in taxes. So even though I got like a decent raise moving here, the actual number on my monthly or bi-monthly paycheck it's only like a $200 difference. So that was kind of a bummer to find out, but it's fine. I'm an adult, it'll be okay. So the difference between an IRA and a 401k. A 401k is something that your company sets up for you. You can't set up your own 401k. That is why it's a benefit for employment. It's like one of the big things that people actually like say yes to salary jobs for is to get that 401k and get that percent match. The annual contribution limit for 401k is $19,500, I think, $19,500. think that goes up to 20,000 in 2022. So that's another one that will like grow incrementally. And you can have Roth and traditional 401ks as well, but you can also do a mix. So you can have a Roth 401k and a traditional 401k, but the combined contribution limit of those together is 19.5 in a single year. So it's really interesting. So for 401ks, if you have a Roth 401k, there's no annual salary limit. Like you can make as much money, whatever, and still be able to have one. For an IRA, if you make over $145,000, you can't have a Roth IRA, or you can't contribute to a Roth IRA. So if you started one when you were making much less, and then you have several years, and then you get a promotion and you're making more, you could keep your Roth IRA, you just can't add money to it. So all the money you already put in, you can still take out tax-free. You just can't continue putting more money and get that tax-free advantage. So, oh, I didn't even notice that Nick left. Another kind of account is an HSA, a health savings account. The contribution limit for that is $3,600, so it's a much smaller account. This is an account that's called triple tax advantage. What that means is you don't pay taxes on money that you put into it. You don't pay taxes on money that comes out of it, and you don't pay taxes on the money that grows inside of that account, which sounds crazy. You're like, then what's the disadvantage? The disadvantage is that you have to have a certain kind of health plan in order to do that. So maybe your employer doesn't offer that. But if they do, then and you can get that, you can only spend that money on health care and other health expenses if you don't want to get taxed. If you just take the money out and buy whatever, you're going to pay taxes on that if you use it like a normal investment account. The thing about HSAs that's super cool is that you can claim against them, as long as you have the receipt for it, against them for any medical expense that you've had for the past 20, 30 years. It doesn't matter. If you paid for it, you can claim that and pay yourself out of that account. So to give you an example, I see a psychiatrist, and if that's, maybe $100 every 30 days, 165, I think, every 30 days to see this psychiatrist. If later on I am strapped for cash, I can gather all of those receipts where I paid for my psychiatrist, claim it on my HSA, and then pay myself back for those expenses I've already had.
Does this have anything to do with those flexible spending accounts some companies promoted?
That's a good question. I don't have a flexible spending account. So I don't think I can answer that for you.
Cool.
This is specifically something that you elect to have through your health insurance benefits.
Okay, cool. Because it sounded very similar, as you can pay your medical bills tax-free. Kind of.
Yeah, no, but that's the point of an HSA is to do that. So if that's what the flexible spending account does, I think it's the same, but it comes with a debit card.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's something, it probably has to do with like the contribution limits or something like that. I'm not sure. But always like read the fine print, because a lot of times people don't get those things and they can be like super, super helpful. So I see a question about the Roth 401k different from traditional. This is the same thing about the taxes. The only difference is when the taxes get taken out. Is it getting taken out of your paycheck and then the money gets deposited in the 401k? Or is your money getting deposited in the 401k and then once you're 65 and you go to pull it out, then are you paying taxes on it? So Roth means I'm paying taxes now, and the traditional pays taxes later. So I have both a Roth IRA and a Roth 401k because I thought that it's pretty likely that taxes are going to be higher once I'm older. So that's sort of the idea there. What's up?
But you could also think that if you put it into traditional, you can just get it in certain amounts that your threshold will be lower. Let's say right now you're paying 35% taxes. If you just take like 25,000 out every year, then you're gonna pay like 15-20%.
Yeah, no, and that's another great point. And you can, like I said, you can have combined. You can have a Roth 401k and a traditional 401k. So I could have, I mean, that probably would have been a good idea when I moved to New York, was to start switching to a traditional. And then with the idea of maybe, oh, I'll move back to Texas when I'm older and the taxes in Texas are going to be less. That's exactly why you would choose a traditional over a Roth. Now I feel like I need to change things in my elections. That's a good idea. So as far as those accounts go, do you guys have any other questions before I move to some vague health insurance stuff? And then we can look at some budgeting.
For those checking account that you mentioned, is it something we should discuss with our employer, or is it something that's available for anyone pretty much?
You do, it is employer sponsored. So that is a great question when they're telling you, that you know, they're talking to you, oh, here's the offer, you'll make this much money and then you have full benefits, you'll have health insurance benefits. You say, oh, well, do you guys have like HSA sponsored accounts?
HSA, you said?
Yes, health savings account. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And you know, they can tell you yes or no. I think most like big companies would have the option. It's really frustrating because actually knowing what that is going to cost you, because these accounts are all good and fun, but you still have to like pay into them, right? Because in order to get an HSA, you have to have the health insurance that has the HSA, which is a little bit more expensive. So there's HMO and PPO. I forgot what this stands for, but you can Google it. I don't think people that did talk about health insurance don't even, it's fine. It's just an HMO is usually not, I think it's usually cheaper per month, but you do have to see a primary, like your primary physician first. So you're paying around $60 to $100 less per month. But if anything happens, you have to like go to this doctor first and then they refer you to a different doctor. I have the PPO, so I pay a little bit more, but then instead of having to mess with that, I can just, you know, oh, I'm having this issue, I'll just go to a specialist. I'll just skip the extra steps. Like I had this weird tonsil thing and I was like, I'll just go to the ENT. I don't need to go to my primary care physician first. But if I'd had the other insurance, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So like for me as someone where behavioral health support, like psychiatry stuff, that's really important to me because I'm very ADHD and I've been medicated for that since I was 13. I knew that was an expense I was going to have. Getting a PPO made a lot more sense because I can just choose a psychiatrist. I don't need to go talk to a doctor about a referral to a doctor. But as far as like how you should be investing, really the most important thing, the one thing you can't get back is of course time. My dad sat me down when I was about to graduate and showed me, this is actually his spreadsheet that I adapted for this presentation. What showed me the actual difference between starting 10 years later versus immediately when it comes to investing. So this is pretty small text. Sorry about that. So this is to start with an IRA. Let's say you are 25 years old and you want to max out your contributions. A 7% rate of return on an IRA is pretty typical. Generally, they say that like the, it's like between 6 and 8% once you like look at it over a long period of time. So as you can see here, if you start just for the first 10 years and say, you know, life gets tough after this, maybe you get married, you have kids, you're saving for their college funds, that kind of thing, you're not going to be able to keep contributing. But for these first 10 years, like you really scraped by so that you could max out your contributions. By the time you get to retirement age, like you have $700,000 in the bank. This is, you're not even spending anything else beyond those first 10 years. At 70, that one account will hit $1 million. Alternatively, if you skip the first 10 years and then start, once you're settled down at 35, you're like, all right, now I feel comfortable. I can start contributing. I didn't need that extra cash in my pocket to get by. You're still a little bit behind, but look at the difference between what it cost you to get there. You put 60,000 of your own money here and about $1 million. Here you have to put over 200,000 and you don't even hit $1 million. So this is why starting earlier is so powerful. And this is basically the same thing, just demonstrated on the 401k. Same rate of return, usually like 401ks. Oh, nice, great, love that. 401ks and IRAs experience really similar rate of return. And so this is around 200,000. This account would have 3 million in it. And this is really similar, but it's over 3 times more to get to that almost same point. And an HSA, if you want to, you know, let's say you're planning on having kids, you're contributing like this. In the US, giving birth can be like $40,000. It's like super unfair. But here, by the time you're 33, 34, you would have that. You would be able to use that if something happens, if for some reason it's not covered by insurance, and you or your spouse has a complicated birth that costs a lot of money, you have something to fall back on. And again, it's like a quarter of the cost to get there if you start. And this is only for 10 years, like the first 10 years, that's it. So this is why when it comes to compounding interest, starting as soon as possible is so important. So there is a concept that I had to be introduced to. It sounds weird, but it's possible to invest too much in your retirement. So like, that sounds weird. You're always like, everyone's always says like, put as much into your retirement as you possibly can. But what if, you're making decent money and you're putting as much as into your retirement as possible, but you don't have that much in liquid assets. You don't have that much in actual savings that you can pull out without penalty. And then for some reason you become disabled. Even if it's just for like 2 or 3 years. Those 2 or 3 years, how are you going to live? Like that's a really hard situation. And I don't know, I can't really see who all's in here. I see a lot of dudes. But statistically speaking, for women between the ages of, I think it's 20, I want to say 25 and 36, 1 in 4 women in that age group will become disabled for 2 years, which sounds crazy high, and it is, but a lot of times, like what that is accounting for is complications with pregnancy, it also factors in with the current numbers, rates of COVID. And so it's just like, maybe you aren't like fully, I'm not talking disabled like paraplegic or something. I just mean like, maybe you have chronic pain associated with a surgery that you had to do, and it just hurts too much to sit in a chair. What are you gonna do, right? So a brokerage, if you are going to invest in anything, I would suggest maxing out your HSA first so that you have that fallback with medical expenses. And then sort of a toss-up between maxing out your IRA and contributing to a brokerage, and then contribute to your 401k as long as you're getting a match, right? If your employer is willing to match you on stuff, like don't lose out on that. But beyond that match, I wouldn't put much more into a 401k, because you can put that into a brokerage, have more control over what's invested in. And an IRA typically has, I think, a return. 401k and IRA have a return around like 7%. A brokerage can have a return of up to 14, 15% over 10 years. It all depends on what investments you choose. So this is, all right, you go. What's your question?
So you were saying that the companies create those 401k accounts for us.
Yes.
And if I were to change employers after some point, then can I still have my same 401k account, or is the new one's going to be created?
No, that's a great question. Most employers work through Fidelity, net benefits. So like that's where my 401k is. I actually, I put in my 2 weeks at IBM on Monday. So I'm leaving really soon. But that is that's my money. That's my account. It comes with me. And when you go to a new employer that perhaps does the match, they will either ask you to transfer that account to their whatever like bank that they use, brokerage firm that they use, or chances are that they use net benefits, and you can just like put in your account info and it'll go to the same place. But it's in your name. Your company opens it on your behalf. You own it. They can't do anything to it.
Cool.
So this is a brokerage. You can put as much as you want into a brokerage. I put in like 1,200 on this spreadsheet just to show what it can do. 14% is that's like not a crazy, not an unreasonable return. But again, with the 10 years in the beginning versus doing it now, like this is how 12,000 becomes 2.5 million versus 40,000, which is still not a lot, but it never even reaches a million. And so with a higher rate of return like that, like the difference is massive. And then this is effectively the same, all the accounts, if we're talking about net worth. I don't know if I said this earlier, but an HSA has a lower rate of return. They don't want your health investments to be in like super volatile markets, just in case like shit happens. Then you can't pay for your, I don't know, chemotherapy or something. So typically they will invest these in less volatile markets like gold or bonds or those kinds of things. Your brokerage is going to go into like stocks, mutual funds. That's why you have a higher rate of return. It's also riskier. But these are all like stopping after the first 10 years. If you did all of this for the first 10 years and then just let it grow, I'm gonna move all of y'all's little heads over here. Then, by the time you are 65, by the time you're 70, I guess, you would be at 6.6 million. That sounds crazy, but Let's say you did all this and you maxed it out and you kept with it up until you retired. This, that's 11 million. That's also great. That's way crazier. So I never had someone like sit down and combine all these together and show me like what it meant. My dad gave me this one spreadsheet for, I think it was just for the IRA. He wanted to show me why I should open an IRA. So I made all these other pages just so I could look at it. And this is, again, that same information across the board if you waited 10 years, and it's less than half. And it costs way more. But if we wanted to look at a sample budget, this is what you can do when you graduate right off the bat. So taxes in Texas, I think if you start with a salary of 75,000, it should be 20.4%. This is basically how your money is going to be allocated over the year. This is going to be per month. So in your first year, if you're making 75,000 and you, let's say, so IBM gives us, they contribute $800 on our behalf to an HSA. So if I put in 2,800, that's going to max that out. The idea of contributing too much to your retirement comes in here. If I were to put in, say 3,000, that's 3,000 plus 800 is over the 3,600 that's allowed to be put in, like with IBM's contribution. IBM will just back off their contribution and not say anything. They're like, oh, cool, you got this? Nice. So if you're contributing too much, the same thing for the 401k. So whatever, like say they'll match up to 5% of your salary, but like you have to put in 5% of your salary and then they'll match that. So 5% of 75,000 is 3,750. So if you put in 3,750, they'll put in 3,750. But 19.5 is the limit. So if you put in 16,000, they're only going to put in 2,500, and they're not going to like say anything about, oh, you're leaving money on the table. Like you're just giving up free money is what that does. So let's say, you start working, you're making 75,000, which I think is pretty typical for the Houston area. I'm not sure. When I started working, I moved to Austin and it was different. And I don't think I'm the cookie cutter for the situation. So if we want to max out HSA and Roth IRA, we're going to do that. 401k, first year, don't put anything in your 401k. Don't do it. You don't have to. And I want you to know that the percent match usually doesn't kick in until you've been an employee for a year. They'll set up a 401k for you, but they're not going to put in money until you stay there for a year, which I didn't realize. So I actually put in a lot my first year and didn't get a match, and it was very annoying. So I could have just dumped that all into a brokerage and then had a lot more liquid assets to start off with. So that's what I did here. So I put, this is based on this distribution, this is 30%. And beyond these contributions, I said, okay, I think I need about 7,000 in cash just to like get started. And then 6,000, whatever's left over, I can dump it in my brokerage. What's cool about the way this is that I've already factored in 25 or 20% for rent. So if you're living somewhere that costs $1,250 a month, like you're living fully within your means, and you're doing good. This cash is like when people say, oh, you should have 3 to 6 months of your expenses just in cash. That's what this is for. This is what you're trying to establish here. You're going to encounter unexpected costs like something happened to me. My cat died. It cost me $1,000 for my cat to die. My first year working. That sucked. I snapped a suspension coil in my car the next month. That was $1,000. And then of course, like, let's say you want to move somewhere and you got to buy a mattress, $800 if you want a decent one. You drop your phone, it breaks, you got to buy a new phone. That's a bummer. That's what this cash is. This is going to get consumed. It's not rolling over. We're not saving it. This is money that I'm putting aside with the intention of it being spent this year. Second year, we're doing the same thing, but now you get your match. So let's go ahead and start dumping money into your 401k. This is kind of a lot. You could do less than this. You could do like 4,000. So it's funny that you asked that about leaving before it's vested. At IBM, their match happens every year on December 31st. So even though I've been contributing this year, I'm leaving before December 31st. And in leaving, I am giving up about $6,000 that I would just get in free money. That is something that I use to negotiate my new compensation and my new role. So I told them straight up, like, hey, if you want me to join you this year, ideally I could push my start date, but it's a little bit too far out. So I could probably ask them to wait like 2 or 3 weeks. I don't think I could ask them to wait like 6 weeks. I wasn't even really looking for a new job. I just got like hit up by a recruiter on LinkedIn, and then it worked out. The compensation is really good. It's definitely worth moving. It's just annoying that I would be leaving that money on the table. But after we started here on this brokerage, this big lump sum, like, let's back off to 1,000 so that you can now get your 401k started. And then from years 3 to 5, I assume that, you got some kind of promotion, another 10K more. I don't think that this is unrealistic. Like, if you are not within your first 2 years, if you are not shopping around and seeing what else you can get, diversify your experiences, look inside and outside of your current company, you're doing yourself a disservice, especially in this industry. And then again, from 6th to 10th, we're assuming that you moved up another 10K, that this is for like over 5 years. Beyond that, you're making 6 figures. This might sound really privileged, conceited. If you are not making 6 figures by the time you've been in this industry for 10 years, what are you doing? That's like, with the degree that you're graduating with, this should be realistic for you. If you were a software engineer, this is attainable. And if you're at a company that is telling you it's not, if you are surrounding yourself with people that are telling you that that's not attainable, you might need a new job, you might need new friends. But this is what it ends up looking like. So if we want to talk about, wish I could make this thing smaller. Oh, I can make that small. Nice. We want to talk about buying a house. I think with the brokerage, like 60,000 is 40,000 is like a pretty typical down payment. 60,000 will get you definitely a much cheaper. Sorry, my roommate's cat is in my room, and my roommate just got home. I gotta go let her out. They're very annoying. My roommate and her cat are like, it's crazy. They're inseparable. Anyways, by the time you are, what year is this? 27. If you started working at 25, by the time you're 27, you don't have a lot of expenses, like maybe you don't get married, you don't have kids that soon. Like, your net worth is huge. And then, what is this? So this was 27, maybe by the time you're 30, you could buy yourself a house. You don't need dual income for that. You could buy yourself a house. And then this will just keep growing. But this, I think, is 41. Your net worth will hit $1 million by the time you're 41. So just to like figure out what is a realistic goal for yourself, because I've had a little challenge with that. Like, where should I be as far as investing and worth goes. Hitting around 10K your first year is a really good goal, I think. Anything above that is like, mwah. So as far as buying a house, if that's a good investment, that is going to be like ultimately something that only you can answer. I would be in a position in about 2 years to buy, well, probably next year to buy a house if I wanted one. But where I am in my life, especially where I live in New York City, like I could buy a house in Texas standards, but I probably, the property I would be able to afford in New York is like a crack house. And I personally just like don't feel ready for the permanence of a mortgage, or like to actually be tied down to a property. So I am not going to buy one in the next couple of years. I think I'm actually gonna buy a boat. I'm gonna buy a boat, I'm gonna live on a boat, and then I'll just go on sabbatical to the Bahamas and nobody will see me for a few years. It'll be fine. But that's what I'm working towards. But if you wanted to see what happens if we factor in student loans, I hope this is realistic. To be transparent, I didn't have any student loans. I was really fortunate to have parents that covered that for me. So I did some research. Like I said, the average loan amount for a student at UH is $26,000. I estimated with 30 just to be above that. I'm also not super sure how interest rates on that stuff works as far as like when you graduate and whatnot. I did see that a 5% is like pretty normal. So I tried to factor that in as well. So if we want to basically not get just drowned in this snowball of what is interest, because interest works, like we showed, it works really well for you. It also works just as well against you. So we're going to try to get rid of this loan amount as quickly as possible to the point to where it's painful, right? So what we're showing here, a good rule of thumb is to spend about 15% per year of your annual salary per year on your loans, trying to get rid of your loans. What this reduced was your savings, and it also reduced your everything else. Rent is still 20% like it was in the previous budget. It just is going to make it a little tighter. So this is like still living in the same place. You're not making any concessions. You don't have to live in, you know, a 2-bedroom house with 8 people or anything like that. But this is what your monthly payment is going to look like. So split between 2 paychecks, that's pretty painful. That's a lot of money. And it is going to be hard to pay that off, and seeing that come out of your paycheck every month, every 2 weeks is going to be incredibly disheartening. But it'll be super worth it, because I think based on the math, by November of your 3rd year out of college, it'll be gone. You have it completely paid off. So here, like before, don't start your 401k because you're not going to get that match. That money is better spent setting yourself up for being able to pay this off. If you notice, there's a little bit less in cash over the year here. So that is going to translate as be a little more careful with your things. Maybe don't drop your phone. If you do drop your phone, you have to buy a new one. You don't get the newest one, buy a used one. This is going to mean taking really good care of your car so that you do like continuous maintenance instead of waiting until something breaking and you pay for that. It's going to mean a lot more cooking from home. You're not getting takeout with friends all the time. Maybe you're not going to go grab drinks weekly with your coworkers. You could go every other week, something like that. if you're making 75,000, like I said, 3750 is 5%. So in order to get your 5% your second year, put in at least 3750. I put in 4,000 because it's a nicer number. This is still a little tighter on cash. So you should hopefully be a little more established with your 3 to 6 months of expenses. This is still going towards that, and hopefully you're not spending all of it. By the third year, based on what you have paid off and what that works out to, you can actually start putting 23% into your savings. So this is where you're going to start your brokerage account. This is assuming the same bump in pay. So to keep up with that, you have to up your contributions as well to your 401k, so you take advantage of the 5% match. By the way, I've been saying 5% just because that's what mine is. That's kind of industry, it's pretty typical. Some companies offer up to 6%. If they do, that's amazing. That would make me consider a job offer way harder, I guess. I don't know. I would think long and hard about that if I had a job offer that was for 6% match. And another one that was only for like 5% or 3%. Even if like the other one paid a little bit more like that, because this is, even if like the money works out the same, that will incentivize you so much more to save, and it'll set you up in the long run a lot better. It's all psychological, right? So after this year, you don't have any more loan payments. So here you're able to, you bump up a little bit just to make sure you're like keeping good with that 401k, but you're going to start dumping a lot for these 2 years into the brokerage. And then for 6 to 10, same raise, you're up here now, you're at 30% of your income can go into this. And as you're getting raises, that also is going to increase the other percentages of things you can spend money on. So like if you wanted to move from your first apartment to another one that's nicer, like the way that this is talking about rent being 20%, like you can still afford 20% of your income if you just break it down by percentages rather than by like dollar amount. So here we've like backed off a little bit on the brokerage. You're doing more in your 401k, you have a little more cash. Maybe like you just have more, maybe you have 3 dogs now, or you have a kid or whatever it is. This is what it ends up looking like. And if you notice, what year is this? That's 40. So at 40 years, you have 800,000. Let's go ahead and see where you end up hitting $1 million. Okay. So that is at 42, which is the same year this person who didn't have loans hits $1 million also, I think. Is it 40? Oh, it's 41. So it's 1 year off. So starting off with loans, you have to make a few concessions with that for sure. But it doesn't set you back, not in the way that a lot of people think it will. As long as you take a serious approach to your own budgeting and your own finances. So I thought this would be a really good thing to show y'all. I hope you appreciate it. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. If y'all have any questions, we have time now. I'm also in the Discord because I was an officer before I graduated, so I've been there for a hot minute. If you guys ever want to shoot me a question about, a career question or interviewing or money or I don't know, favorite recipes or something, I don't know, it's fine. I'm here, and I'd be more than willing to give you an answer or hop on a call or whatever.
Is the brokerage you mentioned is pretty much your personal investment from your after-tax income?
Brokerage is this is money that is going to go into like your bank account, and then you're going to choose to put it into an investment account. So I use Charles Schwab. I'm a fan of Charles Schwab. Their Fidelity is another company that is pretty good to invest with. basically they are going to, like, you can open bank accounts with them. Yeah, TD Ameritrade is another one. And they will have a like financial advisor or someone who like manages your portfolio that can help you choose like what kind of account specifically to open. You have to be a little bit careful about people that the difference is I can't remember what the job title is. Financial advisor is someone you should be careful about. You should definitely like straight up with them, ask them how they make their money. You know, is it off of, are they getting commissions off of you every trade or whatever that gets made? Or do they get paid a flat rate per person? Because a flat rate is going to mean they treat their customers or their clients much more equally. That it's not going to matter how much money that you invest with them. Sometimes they make their money by having you buy like insurance policies. So I actually have a financial advisor, and I bought income insurance, which I'm going to be honest, when I was getting it, I didn't really understand. I was like, yeah, that sounds great, blah, blah, blah. I don't regret buying it. I actually am kind of glad that I have it. But I think when I was first working with this financial advisor, I like was really super ignorant and just sort of like signed up with shit. And maybe at the time I didn't need it. It's fine now. It's basically if I get laid off or something, or like I mentioned earlier, become disabled in some way. IBM only pays disability that is like 48% of your income, which is nowhere near enough to match what my expenses are. So I paid for income insurance on top of that, to where Northwestern Mutual, that company, would pay, I think together it's 105%. So if I, for some reason, were to become disabled, I would actually be getting more money per month than, just a little bit, than I do as I work. That to me feels like a good investment, because like I said, as a woman, the rates of disability are so much higher, especially in my specific age group. You might not find that to be worth it for yourself, and that's totally fine. But I do have, he's not a financial advisor, but at Schwab, I think they're called a financial representative. You get assigned like a rep in that way, and you can build a rapport with them. And then they can talk to you about what in general people do to set things up. And if you want to talk more about specific investments, then they'll hook you up with one of their institution's advisors. So when it comes to getting a financial advisor, that's hard, because I personally don't have a lot of experience about it or with it. If you're talking about a brokerage, I would probably do something similar to what Charles Schwab does, where they give you a representative, and that person doesn't make money off of you and your investments. They just like are hired to answer your questions. And then like you're gonna have to read a lot and do your own investments. It's funny, my dad's a big number guy. He's also an engineer. And he said that, you know, I don't know what didn't ever want to talk about his own money with me. But so I don't know what the actual money amounts were, but like theoretically he had an account with $30,000 in it, and he let Charles Schwab manage 10,000. He managed 10,000 himself, and then he let 10,000 just sort of sit there and get the normal interest. It like wasn't invested. Or I think maybe he did it in just like some basic investments and didn't do anything with it. And his grew by a lot. And then the other two chunks of it grew like the same amount, except for he had to pay this financial advisor. So like they made they made money and he didn't make that good of money off of that chunk. And he just like, he made more himself. And that was with keeping an eye on like what, what companies people were talking about, what was happening in the market, just over time, slowly like diversifying your assets. Like you don't want to put all of your money into a specific company, right? But if you like, you hear things like, oh, the lumber industry is facing a lumber shortage. Like maybe when you first hear that, split some off, put that into the lumber, see what happens, you know, and it starts growing. Oh, split that in. One of the things that I did, which is one of the smartest investments I made, was before the COVID vaccine came out, I got a minor in biology with an emphasis on immunology. So this stuff like bio and whatnot, like makes a lot of sense to me. So I went and found the clinical trials that were happening for the COVID vaccine and read up on like basically where they were and what they were doing, and took a bet on who was in quote unquote second place as far as who would hit human, who would be like approved to use on people first. And that company was BioNTech. So that is who owns Moderna. And that ended up being a really great investment because I bought it when I was at 40 and now it's at like 280. I was a little bit afraid of it. I only put like $400 in it. So I didn't make a lot objectively, but I made a lot in percent, which feels good. So it's that kind of stuff. Like you can start investing with really small amounts like that, and learn a lot. Learn what you like. Did this feel good when I bought it, or did I just buy it because someone told me to? What was the payoff? Was that person right? What was their reason? And then you over time get more experience and become more attuned with what the market is doing. It has a lot to do with, honestly, staying caught up in the news. You know, like this is why our parents would listen to NPR sometimes, like or watch the news every night, because to be aware of the world around you means that you can be making more intelligent decisions about your own money. So there's that. A super common financial mistake that I've seen for new grads is buying a car. Do not buy a car. I cannot stress it enough. And if you do buy a car, like no newer than 2017. Seriously. Like the 2015 to 2017 cars are phenomenal and modern enough. You do not need a new car. I had a friend who bought a car while he was in college because he was working. This dude was crazy smart, super hard worker, working 40 hours a week, making a ton of money as far as like being a college kid goes. It was unreal. He was working at a biochem plant, and his major was biochemistry. So it was like within his degree, it was really good work experience. And he bought some like special edition Mustang, whatever. It had like red leather. They only made 2,000 of them. And his car payment per month was like $700. And then he couldn't even park it in the sun because of the red leather. Like it would bleach the leather. He was like a little bit homeless in there when his company went under. And before he got a new job, he was like, because he was living in the apartment above the company's office building. So like where he lived was dependent on the company. His income was dependent on the company. And then it ended up like they went belly up for some reason. I think they were like a sister corporation of the plant that exploded a couple years ago. And so like that, just the amount of money and the people that died during the explosion, I think that happened in 2017. You guys probably remember there being like smoke across Houston, across the sky for like a week straight. It was, that wasn't his plant, but it was owned by the same company, or I guess parents corporation. And so then all of a sudden he just had this car, a massive payment, and then nowhere to live or work. That is like just about the worst thing you can do is buy an expensive car. And be super careful about anything that's a monthly payment, because I'm gonna be honest, I splurged a little bit on a mattress. There's a lot of insomnia in this body, and so when I graduated and was working, I was like, I deserve to sleep on a good mattress. And don't get me wrong, I love my mattress, but paying like $140 a month for a year, I was pretty sick of it 6 months in. I was like, I wish I just bought a shit mattress at Walmart. I wish I just waited, because this on top of like this other monthly subscription. I got insurance after my other cat passed away. I got insurance on my cat so that if something like that happened again, I wouldn't be surprised by $1,000 charge from an emergency vet. And then of course, like car insurance, my phone payment. I had to get a new phone because I shattered it doing something really stupid. And then like the internet service that I got, I splurged a little bit for like the the fiber. I didn't need all those things. I could have gotten basic internet. I didn't need the newer phone. And like I could have done something else with all of that money, maybe invested it. I mean, I'm fine now. I don't think those are huge regrets. Ultimately, just like know that those monthly recurring expenses are going to catch up to you, and they are going to suck. So as much as you can stay away from subscription model stuff, or paying things back, or Affirm or QuadPay or whatever you use, like try to only buy things if you can actually afford it. If you can't actually afford it, go with the cheaper option. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had to talk about.
All right, Madeleine, thank you so much. This has been incredibly informative. I feel like I've learned a ton. Just before we wrap things up, I wanted to see if everyone wants to turn on their camera really quick. We can get a nice group photo. Come on, guys, let's get some cameras on. Oh yeah, it's probably good to stop the recording too, Eric.